All right, let's talk axe wedges, or I suppose wedges in general. Um, I've had varying success with the wedges that come with handles. A lot of times, when you get a wedge from a handle, they're a little rough, right? Which is fine, depending on where you get the handle. But like this one here, I'm sure this came with a house handle or something like that, or hardware store. But here we go. You can just see how uneven that is. Like that is rough. It's tapered from here. It's rough. Grain orientation's nice on it. That's okay. Feels like it's poplar. It's pretty non-dense, not dense, not too dense. Porous wood here. So, I mean, that'd be fine, but I'd need to flatten it up. You can see here, this one definitely feels harder. It's still not super dense. This one, the grain's running in a nice direction. This is actually a decent wedge. So I think picking the right kind of wood for the kind of hang that you're wedging is important. Because a wedge like this, right, poplar, that's going to compress a whole lot more than something like black locust will, right? This, you're not going to get any compression out of it pretty much. Like this stuff is solid. Same if you're using like a harder, this one here, cherry. It's one of a hunk of wood that I've got sawed up for. I haven't sanded it yet, but it's so I throw that on the sander, I can make a nice thick wedge or a thin wedge, whatever needs to happen with it. So I like keeping some of these blanks around for how I'm going to shape it. Same for this this piece here. This is actually apple wood. It's pretty cool. Yeah. So knowing how dense your wood is and how much it's going to compress is important for the hang, I think. Like I said, that poplar is going to compress a lot more, which is great in certain scenarios. Like if you guys go way back to the beginning of the channel, my rounding hammer, right? When I did the first hang on this, I believe I used black locust, and the hang was absolutely terrible, really terrible. And then I rehung it, and because of that, I had this weird kind of hourglass shaped eye to fill. And you know what I used? Poplar, because it compresses a ton. You're not going to get as strong a compression, I don't think, with poplar. So if you needed to fill weird gaps, I would go with poplar. If you have a nice straight curve, it's even compression all around, or if you've got an eye that has, pause a moment. Here we go. All right. So if you've got an eye that has the ridges in it, right? This is a nice little Kentucky. It's got the eyes in it, the ridges in it for a true temper, or some of the other brands have too. If you've got the eye ridges in it, and that hickory needs to compress, I think it was Ed that was talking about it, Redbeard Knife and Tool. He likes using a harder wedge when the axe has eye ridges, so that way it forces that hickory or whatever your handle material is to compress it and take those divots of the eye ridges. So that might be a good scenario if you have an even curve where you'd want to use like a super dense wood like a black locust, or one like an oak. This looks like oak to me. So I don't know what handle this came with, but really a lot of tight tight growth rings here. But again, they run in the right direction that I like. So I like handles. You can see when I cut my blanks. This is a good one. You get a lot of contrast with the black locust. When I cut my wedge blanks, I have the growth rings running in this direction. So that way, as you're driving it, if the front half of the wedge needs to go down further, you shear along those growth rings. Right? This here. So this here is a piece of thin piece of cherry. So you can see how that was. It shattered right along. This isn't a wedge. It was left over from cutting wedges. But this piece of cherry sheared right along where those growth rings are. That's what you want. That's what I want to happen inside the eye, right? I want, if you know, the compression in the back's getting too tight and the front half needs to drive further in, right? If we're pinched in the back, that's not moving anywhere, but there's still room in the front half. I want that front half of that wedge to be able to go in deeper, and then afterwards, we'll cut it flush, and it looks nice and even, and like it should. And that way you get nice, even compression in all parts of the eye. So, I like cutting wedges with the growth rings going that way. You can see here's just a poplar wedge from, I'm sure, just a random axe handle I bought. They're kind of going off at off kilter. That's not too bad. I would probably avoid things that have that are like this, that have like big knots in it. It might look kind of pretty from the top, but I don't know how that's going to behave when you go to drive it, right? So that's something to take into account. Again, even ones like this that are the growth rings are kind of going off to the side. You might just start driving that, and you know, this hunk from here might completely chip out, and then you've got your wedge driven in halfway with a missing hunk of the wedge out there, you know, because the wedge followed that fracture along the growth rings and chunked out. So, wedge selection, I think, is important. I don't really see too many people talking about it too much, so maybe it's worth a discussion, or at least some thoughts about it. So like this wood right here, black locust. That's a billet that I sawed up, or split out actually. And an easy way, in my opinion, to get some good high quality wedge blanks like these ones here. These are big planks that I could probably get 2 wedges, you know, standard. This is a big wedge, right? I could probably get 2 standard wedges out of this. Nice and thick. This is out of some maple that I split up. So I usually have a few of these sitting around. I actually need to split up more, but the way I get those is, if you look here, it's just firewood rounds, right? So this has been sitting in my garage for a while now. Split this up a couple years ago. So it's nice and dry. See a little bit checking on the face, but nothing crazy, right? So the way I would split this into take it from firewood rounds into wedge blanks is you'd measure out roughly how long I need for a wedge. Just kind of mark it like that. Then I'd saw this all the way around. If you've got a bandsaw, great, you can use that. If you've got enough capacity on your bandsaw. That's a pretty tall round. Great. You can use a handsaw. You can use a chainsaw. Cut it, basically. So you know what? Instead of just me explaining, I'm actually going to take you through the process so you can see it. So, is this the right saw? Is this the right vise? No, but guess what? It's going to cut it. So we'll have at it. I guess the point of it is, if you have just a handsaw, you can do it with that, but power tools are going to make it quicker. Lots of guys that are into tools have reciprocating saws, and they make some really long blades for these now, so. Get it in the vise tighter. All right, that part's done. Bring you over to the bench, or the stump. So then, as far as things to split it out, you can use a hatchet, like that Plumb carpenter's hatchet I've got here. That would work. The downside to that is if you're trying to split a thinner wedge, you can run the risk of this blade tapers a lot quicker. So you run the risk of cracking the wedge. I like using something a little bit thinner, so I use this BK9. This is a big knife. It's fun for a lot of other stuff, but I almost use it like a froe. I do want to pick up a froe, but I don't have one at this point, so that's what I use this for. Now, because of this is kind of like a perfect quarter, I can go at it from this way, or I can go at it from this way, whichever I think is better. I'll probably go at it from this way just because this is much wider than what I need for a wedge. This is more accurate, so I think I'll probably get more wedges out of it this way. But either way, either one. And when you're splitting it this way, overshoot a little bit. It's firewood. You probably have a lot of it. Because that way, when it comes time to sanding it, you've got a little bit more allowance for weird things that happen in the grain. So we'll go maybe 3/8. And then you've got a nice wedge billet. See, I'm talking about weird stuff in the grain. It's riven, right? You're splitting it out, so you get some of those undulations in the. I don't know if that's even camera, but you get some undulations as it kind of follows the grain there. So you want to leave enough thickness that when you sand it, it'll sand flat. But now you've got those perfect growth rings that are essentially making the wedge like quarter sawn almost. It's not sawn, but quarter riven. I don't know if that's a thing, but that's what it looks like. And before, I know I've talked about this in other videos, but before I got into axes, I got into knives, and this is one of my favorites, longtime favorites. It's a BK9. It was back when they did the roll stamping. I took the thumb ramp off it, took the epoxy paint off it, did some jimping on the thumb ramp, put some aftermarket, well, factory, but you can buy them from the factory. They don't come with it. Micarta scales on it. And it really just changes the whole attitude of the knife. I really like this thing. Not that practical for a lot of stuff, but it's fun, right? 1095 CV, so really user serviceable blade. It holds a great edge. It's tough. It rusts a little easy, but it's an outdoors knife, whatever. Here, maybe we'll do one with the hatchet just to see if it'll do what I'm talking about. And that's one of those nice things too. So one of the things with the axe too is, or hatchet, you don't have as long of a blade. So if you're splitting, you're trying to split larger pieces like this, the grain can kind of go wonky at the ends. Or if you've got a big surface area for the blade, like a froe, which would be ideal, or a knife like this, Kind of lets you cover end to end, so you can kind of control where that split is a little easier. But now it's a little smaller, we can try it with the hatchet too. Like I said, you can use a bigger axe too. Like I said, the more it tapers up, you run the risk of kind of cracking the wedge where you don't want it to. And that worked, because it helps splitting it in such thick billets too. A couple small ones here for some hatchet wedges, I guess. This is way too thick, obviously, but you could probably split it down again for some smaller hatchet stuff. There you go. Leave you with a little less sanding. See, that's one of the what I was talking about. I don't know if this was a check or if it happened when I was splitting it, but you got a little crack here, so that could have been from the hatchet spreading it a little wider than it wanted to be, or could have just been a check on that end grain. But yeah, so that's how I like splitting out wedge material from firewood. I like controlling the grain, riving it out that way. I think helps you make sure you've got continuous grain from top to bottom. I think it makes for a nice strong wedge. I think it creates the growth rings in a direction where it facilitates those fractures easy. So I like it. I recommend doing it. I recommend making your own wedges. You can saw them out of blocks too, however you do it, but this is how I like doing it when you've got logs big enough to do it. So if you're buying, dimensional lumber from a hardwood dealer or something like that, that's a little different. But most of us that are into axes and into this kind of stuff have some firewood kicking around. Chances are some of that firewood probably makes some decent wedge material. I like using maple too. It's kind of in between with the hardness of like black locust, but it's also it's much softer than black locust, but it's also much harder than poplar. It has a lot of plasticity to it. I feel like when you're hammering it, it likes to, like, if you're hammering on this portion here, it'll start to deform before it really like chips out and splinters. So it's a durable wood, I think. Yeah, I like using maple. So experiment with some other kinds of woods that you guys like. Let me know what you think. What do you like using? Do you just like using the standard poplar that comes? There's a lot to be said for poplar because it compresses so nice. But I think you can get some tougher compression out of some other woods too. All depending on what your scenario is and what you're looking to get done. So thanks for watching, everyone. I appreciate it. This is going to be a quick video and I rambled on as usual. So take care.